Okay, hello everyone, this is Professor Robert Solis. Welcome to this video lesson. What I want to do is to gently introduce the repetition structure, and specifically we're going to use a while statement to help us generate a certain number of even numbers based on the user input. So for example, if the user says they want 5 even numbers, they'll enter the number 5 here, so then we'll say that 0 is the first even number, so 0, 2, 4, 6, and 8 will display down here with a space in between. Okay, so I've already created my graphical user interface. This is txt user num, btn submit, lbl result. We're now ready to enter the code, so let's go ahead and double click on the submit button and we'll type in our initial comments. So we have declarations, get user input, calculation, output. So you do this as a template of what it is that you're going to be doing. Now, in terms of the declarations, so the first thing I'm going to have to do is to obtain the user input. So we'll say user num as integer, because they're asking for a certain number of a certain number of even numbers. Well, that means that they're going to have to enter a whole number. All right. Next, I want you to create a counter variable. See, when I have to introduce loops, I want you to think about racing around a track. Like if we go down to the racing track over here at Citrus, and I say, okay, let's run 4 laps because 4 laps is a mile. So you have a counter in your hand, and you're going to start that counter off at 0. And then when you finish your first lap, you're going to click that lap counter, and now it goes to 1. And then you're going to go to 2, 3, and then when you get to 4, then you're finished with the race. That's what a repetition structure is like. How many times are you going to loop? Well, it depends on the goal. If you want to run a mile, 4 times around the track. If you run 2 miles, 8 times around the track, so forth and so on, right? When I play slot cars with my son, what do? We set the counter to 0, and then we go. And then the lap counter takes care of how many times I'm lapping around the track. That's the concept here that you want to consider, right? That a counter is keeping track of how many times you are doing something over and over again. And so what you need to do is to see patterns. Let me show you a couple of patterns. So for example, if you saw this pattern, you know what the next number is. That's 6, right? That's easy. If you saw something like this, again, you could see what the pattern is. You know what the next number is. It's 11. I want you to think in terms of loops when you see patterns like this. When you see numbers that you can get to the next number based on the previous numbers, think repetition structure, because you're going to generate the next number every time you loop through this process. Okay, so let's go ahead and get the user num, and that's going to be convert dot to int 32, and that's going to be the number inside of the text box. Don't forget the dot text. And now we're ready for the calculation. Okay, so the label, the number of even numbers that we want to display, let's go ahead and start that off at 0. So we can say this. We can say, let's see here. Actually, you know what? Let me create one more. No. This is fine. I think we're okay. While counter is less than user num. Press enter. So the while statement has a condition similar to the if statement. As you can see over here, there is the Boolean expression or the predicate. Now, as long as this is true, then we're going to keep on looping over and over and over again. Once this no longer is true, then we jump out of the while statement and we perform any other programming statements after this. Okay, so first of all, what I want to do is I want to print even numbers. All right. Well, the first thing that I want to do is I think I should create a string that contains all of my even numbers. So one of the things I can do back over here is I can say dim output as string, and I'm going to set this thing to nothing at first. All right, and then I think another thing that I'll do is I can generate even numbers, and so we'll say that the first even number is an integer, and we'll set that equal to 0. That's my first even number. Now even number is going to change. The next even number is going to be 2, and then after that it's going to be 4, so forth and so on. Okay. So over here, the first thing that I want to do is to output the first even number. Well, I could put that into a string. As you see here, that's going to be output. See, what's going to happen is we're going to have 0, space, 2, space, 4, space. So what I'll do is I'll say output is going to be the old value of output, which, what is the old value of output? Looks like it's nothing, as you can see over here. I am going to concatenate that with my first even number. But here's the problem. This is an integer, and I want to be consistent and concatenate strings with strings. So I got to convert this thing to a string. So we'll say convert dot to int 32, whatever the value is of even num. And then I'm going to concatenate a space. All right, so what this statement does is it says take the old value of output. Well, as you can see, output is nothing. Then take even number and convert it, and oh, I'm sorry, I said convert it to an int32. I meant convert to a string. Sorry about that. Convert to a string, because it's already an integer. All right, so even num is 0, so what happens is output at this point now is going to be a 0, and then we're going to concatenate a space to that. So if I were to generate a comment over here to show you what it looks like, at this point the comment looks like this, or I'm sorry, the output looks like this. It just has a 0 and a space. Now for that space I'll put an underscore just to give you that representation. Of course there's no underscore. That underscore just simply represents a space. The cursor is blinking right there waiting for the next input. Now do you agree that if the even number is 2, or the next even number is 2, then I have to increase even number. So even num is going to be the old value of even num plus 2. So this allows even num, which is currently 0. We are going to add 2 to that, and then the new value of even num is 2. So what I do not want you to think of this statement is as a mathematical statement. This is not a mathematical statement. You show this to your math professor, they're going to get mad at you, because obviously even num is not equal to even num plus 2. But remember, this is a computer science statement. Whenever you see this assignment operator, you're supposed to read from right to left. So what you're doing is you're saying add 2 to the even num and then assign it into the variable even num. So technically speaking, this is the old value of even num, which happens to be 0. And then you're going to update it so that it's increased by 2. And then you're going to assign that to the new value, or the updated value of even num. Now, by the way, there is a shorthand notation that you can use. You could say even num plus equals 2. This is another shorthand notation. This means the same thing as this. So what I'll do is I'll just simply put a comment over here. This does the same thing as this. It's a shorthand notation, and the way that I read it is like this. Even num is being assigned even num plus 2. So this is an updating statement, an incrementing statement in this case. You could use the same thing for subtraction, for multiplication, for division. Use the same notation if you want to. Okay. So now that I've updated the even num, and it looks like output has been increased, I need to also increase the counter, because remember the counter is keeping track of how many times I'm actually looping through this while statement. So counter is also going to be updated one at a time. So we just finished the first lap. Counter was 0. Now counter is, actually, you know what? I didn't even set counter. So you know what? I better do that now. Glad I double checked here. We'll say counter is going to be assigned 0. So go ahead and do that before you get into the while statement. Assign counter to the value 0. Now, is 0 less than, say for example, the user wants 3 numbers. Okay, is 0 less than 3? Yeah, it is. Okay, so output is going to be updated. The value of even number is going to be updated. The value of counter is going to be updated. We then go to the end of the while statement, go back to the top and ask, shall we do this again? Well, the counter has been incremented by 1. So counter now is 1. Is 1 less than user num 3 in our example? Yes, that's true. So the output is going to be the old output. Let's take that even number and concatenate it to the output. Well, your even number is now 2. And then we're going to send a space. So what happens is over here, your output is going to look like this, 2, and then a space. Of course, that underscore isn't displayed. I'm just using that to represent a space. Well, then over here, even number is going to be incremented by 2. So if even number is 2, well, now it's going to be 4. And the counter also increments from 1 to 2. And we go back over here. Is 2 less than 3, which is our fictitious number that the user entered? Yes, it is. Okay. So then output, the old output, which is this, is going to be concatenated with the even number, which is this, 4, and a space, and I'll put an underscore to represent that. Now, even number is going to be incremented by 2, so it goes from 4 to 6. Counter also increments now to 3. And then we go back to the while statement and ask, shall we do this again? Well, is 3 less than, let's say the user entered 3? No, it's not. So we are finished with our program. We have looped through this a certain number of times. So now I can go to the output section and say the result is going to be whatever output is. And notice that I do not have to do any type of conversion because output is already a string. Output is a string that is being assigned into the text property, which of course is a string. So a string is being placed into the text property, and that's going to label it here. So let me save my work, start the program. I'll move this over so you can still see the code. Okay, so here's the code. I want to see 3 numbers. Okay, 0, 2, 4. Perfect. I want to see 5 numbers. Okay, there it is. I want to see 25 numbers, 25 even numbers, and there you go. So no matter what the user number enters, or what the user enters, you will display a certain number of even numbers because you are doing this process over and over and over again. And that's the beauty of the repetition structure. It allows you to figure out, especially if these numbers are based on a pattern, you need to use a repetition structure because you don't want a bunch of if statements. If the user enters 3, okay, so then you start counting row by row all of the numbers that need to be entered into or displayed onto a label. You don't want to do that. That's why the repetition structure exists. Okay. All right, so this is Professor Robert Solis. I hope this video lesson was helpful. Have a good day. See you next time.